Hello. All right. Welcome to another Facebook Live for Ecstatic Birth. I'm Sheila Kamar-Hay, the founder of Ecstatic Birth. And for those of you that are just getting to know me, I am an ecstatic birth advocate and trainer, which means that I am passionate about raising awareness that childbirth can be one of the most empowering, transformative, and potentially pleasurable experiences in a woman's life. So the work I do is I train birth professionals to support women in enjoying their birth experiences, and I also coach a handful of women at any given time to support them in preparing for childbirth. So on today's Facebook Live, I want to talk about the gap between the vision and the reality. Like, how do we close that gap where we know that childbirth has the potential to be this incredible, ecstatic experience, and yet the reality of what we see over and over and over again is so different? How can we begin to close that gap? So I'm going to make a special announcement in just a little bit. Please make sure to stay with me. And when we're going to go back to that gap, and I want to share a story that I had recently, and I just want to check in and see. Okay, good. All right. I want to share a story about recently I spoke to a high school class of women who were interested in going into women's health. I was invited in there by the teacher, who's a friend of mine, and she asked me if I could come and share my perspective on childbirth with these students. So I went into this room full of 16, 17-year-old girls. There was one boy. And I asked them, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think of childbirth? So I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask you, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of childbirth? If you're watching live, if you're watching later, I would love if you could share that in the comments below. And if you could also share where you're from and whether you are a birth professional or an expectant mom. So what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of childbirth? So at this high school, I posed this question to these 16, 17-year-old kids, and I'm sure you're not surprised when I say for most of them, that word was pain. This is typical of any group I speak to, whether they're young or old or in between, male or female. 90% of people, the first word that comes to mind when they think of childbirth is pain. So how do we transform that story? I'm here to talk about pleasure in birth, enjoying birth, having these incredible experiences in birth. When our dominant story is pain, how can we begin to transform that story? So I continued on with these kids, and here's the interesting part. I put up a diagram of the full clitoris, not just the tip that we're all familiar with, but the whole thing with the clitoral legs and the nerve endings that wrap around the vaginal canal. And I asked them, does anyone know what this is? Not a single one knew what they were looking at. Of their own anatomy, of the female pleasure centers, not a single one knew what they were looking at. So at this point in their schooling, they'd had sex ed 2 or 3 times, right? I confirmed this. Yes, 2 or 3 times they had each been exposed to sex ed. So then I asked, how many of you know how to put on a condom? Every single person in the room raised their hands. Okay, so here it is. This is one of the fundamental disconnects in our society and culture at large. As young girls, as women, we are so disconnected from our bodies. We don't even understand our bodies. We are not taught about our bodies. It is not discussed. One of my favorite quotes of all times is via the work of an artist named Sophia Wallace. She has a campaign called Cliteracy, and the Huffington Post has taken this on, and they put right up front, right there on their website, this is the quote: in 1969, we put a man on the moon. In 1982, we invented the internet. In 1998, we discovered the full anatomy of the clitoris. And I just want to say we are still discovering so much more about the female anatomy and pleasure centers. So you can see the disconnect, right? As women, as girls, as society at large, we are still healing this disconnect with female sexuality. I just want to say, if you do have any questions or comments, go ahead and put it in, and I will come back to them. I just want to share this piece with you. Research recently came out of Rutgers University recently that showed that the baby's head pushing up against the G-spot as it comes down the vaginal canal, which by the way, the G-spot is the base of the clitoris, that the baby's head pressing up against the G-spot helps to numb pain in childbirth. Okay, so I want to share all of this with you to show how we're just starting as a society to put these pieces together. And the piece that we really need to reclaim is that childbirth is a part of female sexuality. We are collectively still healing female sexuality, how to relate to it, how to engage with it. We see this right now in a huge scale across the world with everything that's going on in the media, the Me Too movement, this role of female sexuality, how to define female sexuality, how to relate to female sexuality. We are so in the process of that right now as the divine feminine rises. So the big announcement that I want to share today is, a few years ago, I began very sort of quietly training birth professionals because I felt like I could only reach a certain amount of expectant moms on my own, and this work really needed to get out there in a bigger way. A big part of the work I do is helping women reclaim their sexuality, helping women reconnect to their bodies, helping women expand to the pleasure within, and then the education piece of how that relates to childbirth. How do you use all this information, this body awareness, using pleasure to stimulate oxytocin flow? How do you integrate that into childbirth? So a few years ago, I started training birth practitioners, birth professionals, people that wanted to become birth professionals to do this with their clients. And I've really been astounded by what I've learned by these visionary women who were one of the first to step forward and say, yes, I want to do this. I want to share this with the world. I want to do this with my clients. Overwhelmingly, the weight of the culture, the weight of like this legacy of pain weighs on us each individually as practitioners, right? Because even if we're trying to hold that tone for enjoying childbirth, for pleasure in birth, for having ecstatic birth experiences, for having pleasure in birth, the weight of our cultural heritage is so heavy that any one of us on our own gets easily discouraged. We get burnt out, we get tired. And if you work in the field, I'm sure you can relate to this, that, as a birth professional, to a certain extent, you are mothering your clients. And so just like mothers really suffer from fatigue, exhaustion, burnout from constantly giving and giving and giving, so do our birth professionals. So in this program, we really talk about like nurturing yourself first, embodying these principles of pleasure for yourself so that then you can go out and support another without completely exhausting yourself. So in this work we've been doing, where we've been reconnecting to our bodies as birth practitioners and birth professionals, the amount of energy these women get, the vibrance, their drive to transform the culture of birth has really been touching and really inspiring and really exciting to me. So the thing that I want to share is I've actually created a complimentary training for birth professionals. It's going to be going live next week, and I'm going to put the link in here for you. And in this complimentary training, as a birth professional, you'll get a taste of what I do in my practitioner training. You'll get a sense of the work that we do together, the work that needs to be done to reclaim childbirth. You'll get some concrete information that you can share with your clients. You will get a very simple practice that you can begin integrating for yourself in your body, in your life, that then you can share with your clients as well. So that is something that you'll be hearing more about in the coming weeks as I get ready to relaunch my ecstatic birth practitioner training. But first, this is a week-long program. It's absolutely free. And this is the key to transforming childbirth, is working together, working collectively in unison, because any one of us alone cannot do this. The weight of that cultural inheritance that childbirth is supposed to hurt, it's too heavy. It's too heavy for any one of us to carry alone. But all of us together, we can do this. So I really encourage you, if you support women at any phase in your in prenatal, pregnancy, birth, or postpartum, I really encourage you to sign up. This is my gift to you. You do not have to sign up for anything afterwards if you do not want to. But I really want to start sharing the gifts that I've been giving the practitioners that I work with on a wider level. And I know that this is the key to transforming birth. When we can really take care of ourselves, when we can really start to reconnect to our bodies as practitioners, when we can start to open to the flow of pleasure within, as practitioners and share that with others. That is the key to transforming childbirth. So if any of this resonates, if this is something that you desire for yourself, for your clients, I really would love to have you join me next week. The link to the complimentary training is in the comments. And please spread the word, share it with other practitioners, share it with your networks, share it with your colleagues. Again, alone, it's too much, it's too heavy. But together, we can transform that story of pain. We can start to transform how our women look at their bodies, how they engage with their bodies, how they tap into the flow of pleasure within to stimulate the flow of their labor and delivery. It's not that hard. It's a reorientation. And I'm really, really excited to share that with you and the world at large. If you are an expectant mom and this is something that you're interested in, if you want to have this pleasurable birth experience, share this training with your practitioners and invite them into this paradigm. The more you are supported by a practitioner who's trained in this paradigm, the more likely you are to have that experience that you're craving. And I also just want to say that last week, I did announce the graduates of last year's ecstatic birth practitioner training. They are available on my website, ecstatic-birth.com/practitioner directory. You can take a look there and see if you are one of the lucky ones that has a birth practitioner, an ecstatic birth practitioner in your area. And that's that. I mean, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, I'm open and here to be of service, and I will be monitoring this. So even if you're not watching live, if you want to post any comments or questions, I am available to answer your questions. So that's the big announcement. This is how we can transform birth. We need to really start to heal that disconnect between our understanding of how our body works, of sexuality and childbirth at large. In our culture, things that are baby related are clean and pure and held in this corner, whereas our sexuality, not so much. We keep it over here and far away from our children and our babies. However, childbirth is the culmination of the sexual act. It's not separate and distinct from it. So we really need to reclaim that. We really need to heal that. And we really can start to utilize pleasure as the most holistic birthing tool there is to have these ecstatic birth experiences, to support the flow of labor and delivery, and to ultimately to nourish ourselves as practitioners and nourish our expectant moms as they become mothers. So thank you again for joining me here today, and lots of love. I look forward to seeing any of your comments or questions below.